Strong Pokémon, weak Pokémon, that is only the selfish perception of people. Truly skilled trainers should try to win with their favorites. Karen says that after you defeat her in the Johto games. Hello Internet, my name is Isaac and I am on a mission to selfishly perceive Pokémon. More specifically, I want to find out which Pokémon are actually good in a casual playthrough. Anyone who has played enough Pokémon can tell you from experience that Haxorus is good, while Delibird is not. But I can't think of anyone who has set out to systematically evaluate every single Pokémon line using a consistent structure. So that's what I'm going to do. So while I was editing this video, Wolfie Glick uploaded a video where he ranked every Pokémon based on competitive viability, design, and how iconic they are. That ranking comes from the perspective of an experienced competitive player, which I am not. What I'm doing here is different because instead of ranking Pokémon based on theory or competitive experience, I'm trying to evaluate how they actually perform during a casual playthrough by systematically testing them in full runs of the games. Every experiment starts with a question. In this case, the question is simple. Is this Pokémon good in a casual playthrough? Before each run, I will form a hypothesis, predicting where I believe that Pokémon will land on a tier list ranging from S tier to D tier. Then comes the experiment itself. I will complete a full playthrough of a Pokémon game, with that Pokémon as a permanent team member. Throughout the run, I will document availability timing, performance in major battles, coverage contribution, consistency, level of investment required, and the overall impact on the team. Once the credits roll, I will assign a tier ranking based on that Pokemon's overall performance. Each Pokemon line will be tested across 3 separate playthroughs, and its final tier will be determined by averaging those results. This helps reduce the impact of any one game's mechanics or regional design unfairly boosting or harming a Pokemon's ranking. This will not be a perfectly controlled scientific experiment. Different games have different mechanics, encounter distributions, move pools, and pacing. However, by testing each Pokémon across 3 runs and averaging the results, I aim to minimize the effect of these variables as much as reasonably possible. Now to define what qualifies as a Pokémon line. If a Pokémon like Togetic was originally a final evolution, later received an additional evolution, it will be tested in a game where its true final evolution is accessible. If a Pokémon like Farfetch'd later receives a regional evolution such as Sirfetch'd, then both standard Farfetch'd and Sirfetch'd will be tested separately. Most trait evolutions are excluded from the test, unless they are obtainable through in-game items such as the link cable in Legends Arceus, or available through in-game trades. Palafin is also excluded, because I have no friends. Legendaries, Ultra Beasts, and Paradox Pokemon are excluded as well. If you're wondering whether most of them are good, the answer is yes. Testing them would not meaningfully contribute to this project. After all exclusions, this leaves 476 Pokemon lines to test. With 3 runs each, that equals 238 full playthroughs. At 1 completed run per week, this project will take roughly 4.5 years. With Gen 10 coming out in that time, 5 years is more likely. And yes, I plan to see it through. To determine which Pokemon I test, I use a wheel containing all 476 eligible Pokemon lines. The first spin is guaranteed to be on the team. I then spin again until I land on another Pokemon that is available in the same game as the first spin and does not share a type with the first member. I continue this process until I have 4 team members that meet those requirements. For the 5th and 6th slots on the team, I examine the type chart to determine which types are not yet represented or covered effectively. I then look at the regional Pokédex to identify eligible Pokémon that fill those gaps. From that list, a random number generator selects the final team members. Once the team has been finalized, I determine the earliest possible availability for each Pokémon and make my tier prediction before beginning the run. Availability matters. If a Pokémon cannot be obtained before the 7th gym or its equivalent milestone, the highest tier it can receive is A tier. If it cannot be obtained before the 8th gym or equivalent milestone, the highest it can receive is B tier. And if it cannot be obtained before the credits roll, I'm not going to be testing it in that game. That's not fair to the Pokemon. Next, we need to define what falls in each tier. From the bottom up, we have D tier Pokemon are a liability. It fails to meaningfully contribute in major battles, struggles even in neutral matchups, and often requires protection or support from teammates just to function. It may struggle during grinding, fall behind in levels, or require excessive resources for minimal payoff. If removing this Pokemon from the team would have made the run easier, belongs in D tier. D tier will have 1 point taken away from the total for averaging out the scores of all 3 runs. A C tier Pokemon is not harmful, but it is forgettable. It does not significantly contribute to major battles and rarely serves as a reliable solution to key threats. It performs adequately in routine battles and grinding, but does not meaningfully swing difficult encounters in your favor. If the run would have played out nearly the same without this Pokemon, it belongs in C tier. C tier will have no points added to the total before averaging out the scores. A B tier Pokemon performs well when it has a clear type advantage or favorable matchup, but is limited by stat distribution, move pool, evolution timing, or scaling. It can contribute to major battles under the right conditions, but it is not consistently reliable across the run. It has value, but that value is conditional. B tier will have 1 point added to their total before averaging out the scores of all 3 runs. An A tier Pokemon contributes meaningfully in multiple major battles and has no major flaws holding it back. It might not completely dominate the game, but it reliably performs its role and provides strong value throughout the playthrough. It requires no unusual effort to justify its slot on the team. If you were building a strong casual team intentionally, you would gladly include this Pokemon. A tier will have 2 points added to the total before averaging out the outcomes from all the runes. An S tier Pokemon shapes the run around itself. It contributes to the majority of major milestones, performs well even in neutral or unfavorable matchups, and consistently delivers high impact with minimal support. It does not just fill a team slot, it becomes the backbone for the playthrough. If the run felt defined by this Pokemon's presence, it belongs in S tier. S tier Pokemon will have 3 points added to their total before averaging out the scores from all 3 runs. So what counts as a major battle? Gym leaders, Elite Four members, champion, evil team boss fights, rival battles, trial captains and kahunas, totem Pokemon, Titan Pokemon, noble Pokemon, and the story climax. Now that the tier system is defined, here is how each individual run will be structured, starting with my substitute rule. If a chosen team member is not immediately available, a temporary substitute will fill its role until it can be obtained. Once the target Pokemon becomes available, it permanently replaces the substitute for the remainder of the run. The substitute only exists to maintain a functional team during early progression and does not influence the final ranking of the tested Pokemon. PMs, HMs, held items, and move tutors are all allowed. They are part of a Pokemon's intended move pool, and therefore fair game. However, I will not manipulate mechanics in extreme or unintended ways to artificially improve performance. Before each major battle, all team members will be trained to match the highest level Pokemon used by the next gym leader, trial captain, or equivalent milestone. Once a Pokemon reaches that level, it is set aside until the battle. If the entire team reaches the level cap, progression continues normally. This prevents over-leveling from inflating a Pokemon's performance. Some things that I will not be doing is recatching Pokemon to manipulate natures, reading for IVs, intentionally EV training, farm for perfect stats. If a Pokemon requires optimization to perform well, then it's not a good Pokemon. This experiment evaluates performance under normal, casual conditions. In regards to using evolution items, I will do my best to use them as they become available. However, if a Pokémon requires an evolution item that is locked behind unusually late game acquisition, like the Dawn Stone in Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, I will obtain that item at the earliest reasonable opportunity, using alternative in-game methods. The goal is to test the Pokemon's viability, not the region's item pacing. But for battle items, I will not be using X items. If I want to increase a Pokemon's stats, I'll use a move that raises those stats. Most stat boosting moves provide more long-term value than a single turn X item anyway. Using a move to set up is part of a Pokemon's toolkit. Using X items is not something I consider reflective of the Pokemon's inherent strength. Healing items are allowed. Potions and similar items may be used in battle if necessary, particularly in close situations. Casual players use healing items, and this experiment is meant to reflect a standard casual playthrough. However, I will not abuse healing as a stall tactic. If a battle turns into repeatedly using potions to avoid fainting rather than progressing the fight, that reflects a weakness in the Pokemon or strategy. Healing is permitted as support, not as a crutch. I know that there are many people who believe that set battle style is the better way to play it because it's more challenging and therefore more fun. That is fair. I will be using the switch battle style though, because this experiment evaluates Pokemon viability under standard casual conditions. Historically, Switch has been the default battle style in Pokemon games. In fact, set mode was removed entirely from Scarlet and Violet. Because of this, Switch battle style best reflects how Game Freak intends the average player to experience the game. This experiment measures viability within that intended structure, not under artificially increased difficulty. Because this project started before I decided to publish the results, because it was really just me having fun playing Pokemon, I already have 4 completed playthroughs that are part of my dataset. I didn't take detailed notes during those runs, but I'll be making a couple recap videos so that at least some information from them is documented here on the channel. After that, future experiments will follow the full structured format, and the long process of ranking every Pokemon line can begin in earnest. Thanks for stopping by, and I'll see you next time.